Beat it, Talrand, our new Spellslinger Commander has arrived. That's Lord of the Nazgul. This legendary creature is a Wraith Noble for 3 blue-black. It has flying. It also gives race you control protection from ring bearers. However, the exciting part is, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 3/3 black Wraith creature token with menace. Then if you control 9 or more race you control a base power and toughness 9/9 until end of turn. The goal of this deck is simple. We're going to cast a bunch of cheap instants and sorceries and make our Wraith army and smash face. But first we got to get trippy. Trippy. So we're using a lot of these 1 mana draw a card effects. Cards like Opt to let us scry and draw a card. Cards like Peek that let us look at a player's hand and draw. Then cards like Ponder that give us a few different options, but ultimately we draw a card. We're also running those 1 mana tutors because we're degenerates, and I consider these cantrips. Cards like Imperial Seal, Vampiric Tutor, and Mystical Tutor to get that exact card we need to win the game. I'm even going to include Reanimate because it's a 1 mana sorcery that's going to get us a creature onto the battlefield and also give us a Wraith. Now that we're done tripping balls, we got to get some cards. Some card draw is up next. We've got to keep our hands full of gas so we can keep casting those instants and sorceries and making those Wraiths. This is where cards like Deep Analysis, Factor Fiction, and Frantic Search come in handy. They're all going to get multiple cards to our hand, and some of them have some reusability. I wouldn't be the tool bag that I am without mentioning wheel effects. We're going to wheel a lot in this deck because that gives us a lot of cards and a Wraith. Cards like Cosmic Epiphany, Echo of Eons, and Windfall are my go-tos in this build. Last but not least, I have the Broken Delve cards. The cards that we can get rid of those extra instants and sorceries in our graveyard to make them cheaper to cast. Cards like Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time are all stars in this build. Now that we've got more jet fuel than a jumbo jet, it's time to stop our opponents. That's where this interaction comes into play. To interact like a champ, we got to run some counter spells. We are a blue deck after all. I like an Offer You Can't Refuse, counters a spell for 1 mana, Arcane Denial, and of course Counter Squall makes them lose some life in the process. We're also running some single target removal in this build. I've got some of my favorites up here like Deadly Rollick. It's free to cast if we have our commander and exiles the target creature. Snuff Out is also free. We can pay 4 life if we can control the swamp and destroy target non-black creature. And I've got Infernal Grasp. It's just a good 2 mana removal spell. Besides the 1,000,001 counter spells and 1,000,001 single target removal spells, we do need to run some mass removal effects. Cards like Cyclonic Rift and Toxic Deluge are some of the best that we can offer for this build. Now that we've got all these awesome instants and sorceries out of the way, we've got a few ways to pay off this strategy. Lord of Nazgul is the ultimate payoff, but we need some backups in case it keeps getting removed and we can't afford that commander tax. The first payoff is Docent of Perfection, and its flip side, Final Iteration. With Docent of Perfection, you get a 5/4 Insect Horror with Flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a 1/1 blue human wizard creature token onto the battlefield. Then if you control 3 or more wizards, transform Docent of Perfection. That transformation is Final Iteration. It's an Eldrazi insect with flying. Wizards you control get +2/+1 and have flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a 1/1 blue human wizard creature token onto the battlefield. Wizards are always the perfect backup to Wraiths. Hullbreaker Horror might not make us any tokens, but it will lock our opponents out of the game. It's got flash and it can't be countered, and whenever we cast a spell, we can return a spell we don't control to its owner's hand, or return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. They won't be able to cast anything, and their creatures and threats won't stick. Metallurgic Summons is an enchantment that's going to create us constructs every time we cast an instant or sorcery, and on the flip side, we can exile it to return all of our instants and sorceries back to our hand. Rona, Shieldred's Faithful isn't the most powerful payoff for a Spellslinger build, but I do love this card. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses 1 life, and we can also cast Rona from the graveyard by discarding 2 cards and paying its mana cost. One of our best payoffs has to be Shark Typhoon. This enchantment may cost 6 mana, but whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. The great thing about this card is it's not only triggered by our instants and sorceries, but those mana rocks and enchantments also will make us a shark. For a little icing on top, we can also cycle this card to draw a card and make a surprise shark blocker. I know in the beginning of the video I threw mad shade at Talrand's Sky Summoner, but he does have a place in this deck. Talrand is going to create as a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying every time we cast an instant or sorcery spell. That way we have a flying army that can get in. Now that we have created a massive token army just by spell slinging, we got to make sure those creatures connect and can knock our opponents out of the game. I'm talking about the cards that give our creatures additional evasion or make our opponents unable to block well. First up, there's Dirge of Dread. This sorcery is going to give all creatures fear until end of turn. That means they can't be blocked except by black creatures and or artifact creatures. Therefore, our army is going to be able to get in on those non-black, non-artifact decks. Mass Diminish is going to completely shut down one of our opponents. It's a sorcery that makes creatures target player control have base power and toughness 1/1 until our next turn. Furthermore, it can be flashed back to do it all over again. Polymorphous Jest is in a similar vein, the Mass Diminish, but it's instant speed. Until end of turn, each creature target player controls loses all abilities and becomes a blue frog with base power and toughness 1/1. This is a great surprise card because when they block, you can turn everything into a 1/1 and completely wipe out their board. Sudden Spoiling is another one of those instances that's going to say, oh man, I shouldn't have blocked. But until end of turn, creatures target player controls lose all abilities and have base power toughness 0/2. Furthermore, this card has split second, therefore it can't be responded to. That wraps it up. This is definitely a fun deck to pilot, but don't be afraid of getting hated out because it will happen once they realize the power of this deck. Anyways, the link to the deck list is in the description below, and thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.